The mountain was high. It was a jagged, vertical wall of rock standing against what would have been a cold sky. And when Jesus led them up those slopes, these men, after 6 days of traveling and heavy walking. Why heavy? Well, because just 6 days prior, Jesus had revealed to his disciples that he was to be killed. Peter said, "Surely not, Lord, not you, no." And Jesus has that famous quote, "Get behind me, Satan," he rebukes to his disciple Peter. What's weighing on Peter, too, in this silent 6 days of walking? And here they're climbing up. The air's getting thin as you climb up a mountain. And I would imagine that as it got thin with Peter's frame of mind, his heart must have been beating in that thin air like a bird inside of a cage. Okay? And Peter and James and John went up as men of the valley. These men, they understood the weight of a fishing net, how fast they could get a hold of it, how quickly they could build a tent. They knew the dust of the road, men of the earth. But they were walking straight up this mountain into a collision with God Almighty. Suddenly, the world broke open in front of these guys. There's no other way to characterize it. The man they knew, Jesus, the one whose sandals were covered in the same dirt that was on theirs, was changed in front of their eyes. His face didn't just reflect light as it did upon Moses on Sinai. No, it became the source of the light. It shone like the sun, a terrifying, bright brilliance. His clothes became a white so fierce it didn't look like anything on this earth. Even if it's the dead of winter and I try to go to the beach, it's brighter than that, okay? Just shining, blinding you. And there in the center of this stands Moses and Elijah, the lawgiver, the law, and the prophets, the great prophet Elijah, one who had died long, long ago, and one who had been taken up on a fiery chariot up to heaven. That was the last they'd seen of him, last they'd heard of him. They weren't just standing there, though, with Jesus, not as equals. No, they were talking with him, talking with Jesus. They were having a conversation with the King of Glory. And Peter, impulsive Peter, couldn't just watch and listen. Just like he couldn't just watch and listen to his Lord tell him 6 days earlier that he would be dying. No, he had to interject. He had to say something. He had to be a part of this. You see, most people are, Peter, he couldn't just listen. Most people are afraid of being left out of any conversation. When the glory of God gets too heavy, when the holiness of God starts to press against our skin, we feel an itch to do something. Think about the last time you saw a sunset that actually took your breath away, that actually made you pause and stand in awe. Maybe one of those Central Valley sunsets that we're blessed with, where the sky looks bruised with purple and gold at the end of the day. That kind of moment. What's the first thing that so many of us do these days? We reach for our phones. We fumble with the settings, trying to get it just right to capture it, to freeze it, to hold on to it. It's not just taking a picture, though. It's trying to shrink the majesty of the horizon down into a 4-inch piece of glass. We feel a desperate itch to do something when we behold glory. to document it, maybe even to own it, to possess it, to control it. Because just standing there in the silence of that beauty, just taking it in, makes us feel like we are out of control. Peter looked at the King of Kings, talking with the heroes of the Old Testament, literally. These were the superheroes. And he tried to jump into the middle of the conversation. He broke into a divine meeting with a suggestion that was small and hasty. Lord, it is good that we are here, he stammers. I imagine his voice was probably cracking in that thin air too. I will make 3 tents. He wanted to manage the miracle. He wanted to control it for a bit, to not let it get away from him. He wanted to turn a cosmic event into a camping trip. He wanted to put Jesus in a row with Moses and Elijah, as if they were equal. As if the creator of the universe could be kept in a temporary shack, planned and made by human hands. Those of you familiar with the Old Testament might be thinking, wait a minute, Zach. Didn't God live in a tent before? In those 40 years out in the desert? But there's a world of difference, beloved, between a house that God asks for, the tabernacle, and a house that a man imposes. When God told Moses to build the tabernacle, that specific tent, he gave very detailed blueprints, we might remember, down to the very last gold hook that was to be a part of this tent to house God. That tent wasn't a way for Israel to trap God. No, it was a way for God to be with his people, to be with Israel that he ordained. It was an act of God's grace, the tabernacle, a place where the blood of the sacrifice made it safe for sinners to be near that fiery, overwhelming presence of God. But on the mountain, Peter wasn't following the blueprint. God didn't tell him make a tent or 3. No. He was acting out of fear, out of the desire to control and understand. He wasn't building a place for God to meet man. He was building a fence to keep the glory still, frozen, so that he could comprehend what was happening. He wanted to turn the living, breathing conversation of this transfiguration into something of a museum exhibit, to freeze it, to hold on to it, to behold it as long as he could. The tabernacle, this tent made by human hands, though, was about God coming down to us on his terms. Peter's tents were about a man trying to keep God up on the mountain on his terms. He wanted to freeze that moment so he could feel like he was in control of this light. Are we any different here down on the valley floor? Look at us. We walk through a world that Peter calls in his epistle a dismal place. Dismal. And he isn't lying. We carry the noise of the world in our pockets now. It hums in our hands and it vibrates in our minds. We are hit with 1,000 different opinions about who we are and what is supposedly true. Peter recognizes that people tell us the gospel is dismissed as some cleverly devised myth. That's the wording he uses. A fairy tale for the weak. A story made up to keep the dark at bay. In our fear, we're prone to become tent builders too. trying to box God into our politics, our personal plans, our life history, even our Sunday morning schedules, trying to box him into what our world is. We hear the devouring fire of God's law, the demand for a perfect life. A perfect life. That's what we don't have, though. And we start building shelters of excuses. We look at the hazardous branches of our lives, the personal quarrels that we have, broken relationships, the ways we've failed outright. And we try to manage God's glory. It's kind of like trying to build a hut on a mountain that's on fire. But while Peter was still speaking, while his impulsive words were still dying on his lips, I will make 3 tents, God stepped in, a bright cloud, a weight of glory that makes the sun look like a candle, covers them. And it was the same cloud that stayed on Sinai, back from our Old Testament reading. It was the same cloud that led the people through the sea. And a voice came out of that cloud. It didn't offer a suggestion. It didn't ask for a tent. No. It declared, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." The Father silenced the tent builder. He swept away Peter's ideas with that statement. He pointed to the one who fulfills every promise of the Bible, the one who fulfills every law, every prophecy of the Word. And what did the disciples do? They did the only thing a person can do when they meet the living God. They fell flat on their faces and they were terrified. They were crushed. The fire of God's justice was behind them, and the glory of the Son was in front of them, and they had nowhere to hide. But then, and this is the moment everything changes, Jesus came and touched them. He didn't leave them in the dirt. He didn't let the fire consume them, but the light continued to overwhelm them. He moved toward them. He reached out a hand, and the same hand that would soon have nails driven through them on a different hill. And with that hand, he touched them. He spoke a promise that breaks every fear that we have ever had. Rise and have no fear, he told them. The beloved Son, listen to him, says, rise and have no fear. And they did. That touch is why we are here today too, the Church of God. That touch came from one possessing the blood of the covenant that Moses sprinkled on the people up at Mount Sinai. And it's the blood that makes it safe to be near the Holy God. When you come to this altar later, you aren't following a made-up story, not some fanciful myth. You are coming to the mountain, so to speak. When the bread is put in your hand and the wine touches your lips, it is the hand of the transfigured Christ on your shoulder. He's the morning star that Peter speaks of in the epistle today, rising in the dark, messy corners, lighting up those messy corners of your week. He's the prophetic word, too. The only light that doesn't flicker at all when the world gets loud and scary. The Father is happy with Jesus. He said so. And because you belong to Jesus, the Father is happy with you too. You don't need to build a tent to hold him. He's built a church for you. his blueprint, the church of God. You don't need to manage the glory. You need only to listen to his voice, to listen to his word. So look up. The cloud is gone. Moses and Elijah have finished their work and left. See no one but Jesus only. Hear him. Say it to you now over your personal battles, your stresses, and your pains. Rise and have no fear. The morning star has risen upon us. The night is over and the day is here. You came up the mountain this morning to behold the glory that is our worship service here, to behold God and his word. After service, we are to go back down into our respective valleys with the touch of Jesus upon us, though, with his words, those emboldening words. When you are afraid, remember his hand is on your shoulder. When the world is dark, look to the lamp of his word. Take comfort and be bold. The peace and wisdom of God, surpassing our understanding, guide and keep you all in Christ Jesus until his glorious return on the last day.